Really good question. I mean, it's not getting easier.
No.
And I think the answer is, of course we can. In fact, if anything, our communities are shifting very quickly. You know, once you go to a Zoom or a Facebook or live or a YouTube Sunday service, people you haven't seen for years can check in from California.
Mhm.
And in our particular congregation, many people have also left because they don't like the Zoom experience or the online experience. So serving which congregation? I mean, I love that this seminar is named Who is Your Neighbor? And I think it's kind of exciting to be able to reach people who are unreachable in the ordinary space, place-based format. But I don't know what that means yet. And I'm particularly concerned about people who are either allergic to technology or who are older or who are not digital natives and what they have lost. And I don't know how to give them back what they've lost. So it's a complex question, which is answered yes, of course.
I think COVID has really provided for congregations the opportunity to remind themselves why they exist. When you have a building and everything's easy and there's nothing to worry about, the church can easily kind of turn into a kind of a country club. It looks inward. It's about preserving the space. It's about preserving themselves. All of these things, of course, are deadly, um, metaphorically speaking, to a congregation. So I'm really hesitant to say that COVID is a gift. Of course, it's not. It's a disaster, but it does push us as congregations to think about who's around us and to get out of defining ourselves in terms of just our fortress, but um, who's around us in our neighborhoods, in our city, in our world, um, and really pushing us to, kind of revisit who we are,
Mhm.
which I think is very healthy.
So we're on the west side of Manhattan. As you can see, it's a huge building, but it's mostly, big sanctuary. It's like late 19th century space, so not always conducive for the kind of work that we're talking about. I was going to focus on the food aspect of what we do, so that's I'll just run through these. Prior to COVID-19, we had a grocery store where people could come in and make their own selections and get the food that they needed for their families. They were then checked out by an army of volunteers, mostly who were older folks who would then now be at risk for infection, and we had to really rethink that one in a hurry. Always had a focus on fresh food, so that has stayed the same. All the educational stuff that we were doing. This is a culinary training program that was just so beloved, and that's gone out the window because you just don't do that anymore. All right, so what's happened since? COVID struck us in March, and we had a problem in the building, and so we quickly shut down everything, cleaned everything professionally for the low price of $15,000, which allowed us to restart the operation, but we restarted outside in the street. Not the way we like to do things, but the way we thought was safest for the hundreds of families who were coming to us for help more than ever, of course, with the economic downturn. And also the volunteers. We went through New York Cares and just got an army of younger, hopefully less vulnerable volunteers to work. We have 40 to 50 a day who come in to help us. And of course, huge quantities of food were also necessary. Tried to keep this emphasis on fresh produce, healthy food. As I mentioned, just the need is enormous, and I think those of you on the call who are doing similar work in your congregations, your situations will attest to that. This is 2 blocks from the church, and it's a long line of people, and again, not the way we like to serve people. We like to serve people with dignity, as the door of our mobile food pantry there says, dignity, community, and choice. A lot of that has, of necessity, kind of gone by the wayside. So we're going, the short answer to the question, we're going, but we're going in some very different ways. This is our social hall. It used to be a place where we would do classes and a nice, comfortable waiting space, but now, of course, it's just devoted to many square feet of packing food, getting produce in bags, and these bags are just handed to people now on the street. We realized we needed more space, so we got our young adult group together to. Our sanctuary is huge, and it wasn't being used because we can't do that right now. So we cleared out some space, and then we figured out another way to use the pews, since they weren't full of people, to be full of food that we were sorting out for distribution here on site and also around the city. Sanctuary turned out to be, useful for the pallets of food that were now coming in, not by the case, but by the pallet, and distributed. Makes actually a pretty good warehouse, as you can see. I don't know. It's also been useful for those few times we've needed to do in-person worship, for like a small funeral, which is also live streamed, of course, but for the family to be able to gather. So we just use the pews full of food to kind of divide up the space so that people aren't on top of each other. We're being creative, like all of us are. I mentioned the young adults, the under 30 crowd being just so valuable to the volunteer effort right now, both inside the building and out on the street. Bless them. Sadly, as we were saying earlier on the call, a lot of our volunteers are in the arts, and they have time, but I worry about them as well and their livelihoods getting by. All the things we used to do in person, we had to go virtual with all our big fundraisers. So we just last week had a harvest dinner where we prayed and hoped people would help the effort online, even though they weren't getting any food for it or any entertainment, but we were able to raise about $250,000 at that harvest, our foodless harvest dinner, and our virtual cocktail hour with no cocktails, or bring your own cocktails. Everything else has gone virtual. Our gathering of turkeys, we're trying to get 5,000 for the holidays. That's all. People are doing that online and ordering and sending. All our social service, we have 5 social workers here. They're all doing their work online and remotely. We teamed up with DoorDash to do delivery for seniors, so they didn't have to come here on site. So that's been a helpful thing, at least in the short run. And we are bringing the food to where people are. This load is going to New York Presbyterian Hospital, which is supplying food to their discharged patients and others who are food insecure in their neighborhood up in Washington Heights. That's what's happening there. We've had to rent 4 trucks.
Okay, I have a really quick question for you.
Yes.
We know that, at least I remember when we did our site visit,
Yeah.
and it is a massive, massive space,
Yes.
that you did a lot with prepared foods as well. So
Yeah.
are you doing, or it seemed, at least there was cooking going on when we were there. So has that all kind of just gone? Or are you doing any kind of,
That's
hot
been
food
moved off site to a different facility. So we're not doing it we were doing Meals on Wheels for the
Okay.
seniors. They're still getting that, but it's been consolidated and moved out of our space.
Got it. Okay.
Now,
Thank
which
you.
makes, I miss it, but it also makes it a little bit easier in terms of what we were talking about with precautions and so forth.
Mhm, mhm.
In the middle of this, of course, we had, anybody who has an older church building, we had roof leak and a ceiling cave in. And so quickly had to raise, it's been now, I guess, close to $500,000 for roof and interior repairs. Just, and people were very, very generous. We got help from New York Landmarks Conservancy, which some of you will know about, and also the United Methodist City Society, a denominational group that was very supportive, and also our church member. We didn't know if people would give to something, you know, to us, help us use a space that they couldn't gather in anymore, but people seem to believe in the mission and so forth. And and then last week we got a little recognition from the local newspaper there about the work that we were doing in the sanctuary. So anyway, that's my little thing.